Edward was a small blue engine. He was one of the oldest engines on the railway, and he had seen many changes over the years. Despite his age, Edward always tried to stay positive and helpful. He had kind eyes and a big heart. Everyone on the railway knew they could count on Edward for a friendly smile and a helping hand. He wanted to be a really useful engine, just like the bigger, stronger engines he admired so much. Edward often watched them with a mix of awe and determination. But he wasn't as strong as the bigger engines. This made him feel a bit insecure, especially when he saw them doing tasks he couldn't manage on his own. Edward worried he wasn't good enough. He often wondered if he would ever be able to prove his worth and show everyone that he could be just as useful.
"I want to help with the special job," he said one day, hoping to be given a chance.
One day there was a special job. The railway needed to transport a very heavy cargo up a steep hill, and all the engines were preparing for the task. The engines had to pull heavy cargo up a steep hill. Edward wanted to help. He knew it would be a difficult task, but he was eager to prove himself. But the bigger engines just laughed. They didn't believe Edward could handle such a challenging job.
"You're too small, Edward," they teased. "You'll never make it up the hill. You'll never make it up the hill," they continued, their words echoing in Edward's mind.
Edward felt sad. He had always tried his best, but it seemed like no one believed in him. He knew he wasn't the strongest, and that made him doubt his abilities even more. But he was determined to try his best. Edward took a deep breath, gathered all his courage, and decided that he would give it his all, no matter what the other engines said. Gordon, the biggest and fastest engine, boasted about his strength.
"I can pull anything. This hill is nothing to me."
Henry, with his long green body, puffed out his chest.
"I'm very strong too. I'm not afraid of any hill."
James, the red engine, polished his shiny paintwork.
"I'm the fastest and the most splendid. This job is easy for an engine like me."
Edward listened quietly. He wished he had their confidence, but he knew boasting wouldn't get the job done. He had to prove himself. The Fat Controller, a kind and wise man, watched the engines with a thoughtful expression. He had seen many engines come and go, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Today, his eyes were particularly focused on Edward, the blue engine. He saw Edward's determination and the bigger engine's arrogance. The bigger engines often looked down on Edward, thinking he was too old and weak to be of any use. But the Fat Controller knew better. He had seen Edward's potential and knew that with the right encouragement, Edward could achieve great things.
"Quiet now, all of you. It's time to give Edward a chance to prove himself,"
boomed the Fat Controller, his voice echoing across the yard. The other engines fell silent, their eyes now on Edward.
"Edward, you can have a try. I believe in you. Show them what you're made of."
Edward was surprised, but happy. He had always wanted a chance to prove himself, and now that moment had finally come. He felt a surge of confidence and determination. He puffed his little engine proudly, steam billowing out as he prepared for the task ahead. The other engines watched with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He wouldn't let the Fat Controller down. He knew this was his moment to shine, and he was determined to make the most of it. He would show everyone what he could do. With a deep breath, Edward started to move, pulling the heavy freight cars behind him. The weight was immense, but Edward's determination was even greater.
"He'll never do it," scoffed one of the bigger engines, laughing dismissively.
They scoffed and doubted him, but Edward paid no attention to their negativity.
"Just you wait and see," Edward thought to himself, a determined smile spreading across his face.
Edward ignored them. He focused on the task at hand, knowing that actions speak louder than words. He knew he had a chance, a real opportunity to show his worth. He wasn't going to let it slip away, and he wouldn't waste it. With every puff of steam, Edward moved forward. His determination growing stronger with each turn of the wheels. He was ready to work hard and prove his worth. Edward knew that this was just the beginning of his journey, and he was prepared to face any challenge that came his way.
Edward coupled up to the heavy cargo. He took a deep breath and started pulling. The hill was steep and the cargo was heavy. Edward's wheels spun and his engine puffed. "I can do it," he whispered to himself. "I can do it."
He puffed and he pulled, slowly but steadily. The other engines watched in surprise. Edward was making progress. He was halfway up the hill now. The cargo felt heavier and the track seemed steeper. Edward's wheels slipped and he thought he might have to stop. But then he remembered the Fat Controller's words, "I believe in you." Those words echoed in his mind, giving him the strength he needed. Edward had always looked up to the Fat Controller, who had a knack for seeing potential where others saw none. The Fat Controller's belief in Edward was unwavering, and it was this belief that fueled Edward's determination. He thought about all the times he had helped his friends. Whether it was pulling a heavy load or offering a kind word, Edward was always there. His friends relied on him, and he never let them down. Each act of kindness and support had built up his confidence over time. He thought about how good it felt to be useful. Being useful was more than just a job for Edward, it was his purpose. The satisfaction of a job well done, the smiles on his friends' faces, and the praise from the Fat Controller made every effort worthwhile. With a final burst of steam, Edward reached the top of the hill. He had done it! The climb had been steep and challenging, but Edward's determination and hard work had paid off. The view from the top was breathtaking, and Edward felt a surge of pride.
The bigger engines were speechless. They had always seen Edward as the small, old engine who couldn't keep up with the rest. But now they were forced to reconsider their opinions. They couldn't believe Edward had actually done it. Their disbelief quickly turned into admiration. Edward had shown them that size and age were not the only measures of an engine's worth. They had underestimated the little blue engine. Edward had always been humble, never boasting about his abilities. But now, his actions spoke louder than words. Edward was tired, but proud. The journey had taken a lot out of him, but the sense of accomplishment made it all worth it. He had proven to himself and to others that he was capable of great things. He had faced the challenge and emerged victorious. The hill had been a formidable opponent, but Edward's perseverance had won the day. He had proven that even small engines could achieve great things with determination. Edward's success was a testament to the power of belief, hard work, and never giving up. His story would inspire many more engines to come.
The Fat Controller smiled warmly at Edward. Well done, Edward. You showed great perseverance and strength. You are a really useful engine indeed.
Edward beamed with pride. His heart swelled with happiness. He had finally proven himself to everyone, but most importantly, to himself.
From that day on, the bigger engines never underestimated Edward again. They had learned a valuable lesson that day. It's not the size of the engine, but the size of the heart that truly matters.